I mean, a big challenge with no-till in general is we have some really tight, heavy clays in this area that tend to stay really wet and cold for a long time. And and from a planting standpoint, cold and wet are probably not the two words that you like to hear when you're talking about planting. So so we've struggled with that a little bit, as the conventional guys are rolling. A lot of times the no-till farmers are setting and waiting and watching the neighbors work, and that's really hard to watch at sometimes, when especially when the June's rolling right around and it's rain in the forecast. So um, allowing that warm up to happen so that we go in and we do a good job, because we don't want to err on the early side and then do a poor job planting and have a poor stand. So that's been something that's been a big challenge for no-till in this area. And then you throw cover crops in there, and that maybe even keeps you wetter a little bit longer. Um, so in our cold, wet soils, the cover crops can slow us down maybe a little bit compared to the conventional guy. But what we see is if the guy will drag his feet and wait a little longer, you know, the cover crop's there, it's doing its thing. It's Once it's killed, it's still maybe pulling out some moisture. And then in the summer, we get into a hot and dry, because Mother Nature always has to equal herself out. Um, when we get into the hot, dry part of the summer, we see those crops. They've been behind all year because of our later planting date. But then we get the cover crop fields, and those those crops kind of start to pass maybe the conventional system, and and then it all makes sense in the end. It all works itself out.
I guess the biggest thing that I've learned with the no-till farming and uh, so on and so forth, and it doesn't make any difference whether it's no-till or not. My neighbors get out there and they'll go 2-3 days planting before I do. Uh, but the biggest thing I've learned is not to get out there when the neighbors start with no-tilling. You better wait 2-3 days, because if you plant into that wet soil, you're as soon as that crop comes up, you're going to know you're in trouble, and it'll really show up when it dries off in July and August, and you just cut your yields, I would say, pretty close to half.
Wow.
That is one of the biggest things that I learned when I was starting out with the no-tilling. And my wife still says, well, when are you going to get started? Neighbors are planting. When are you going to get started? When the field's ready. And that is still very tempting to get out there and go, even, well, if 90% of the field's ready to go. Do you go ahead and go, or start planting, or not? And I've always told Ryan, if you have any doubts in your mind that it might be too wet, just let it set.